those investments could be made. We want to ensure that those precious Canadian dollars that are being invested maybe in other parts of the world, that they will be able to, that they will be secure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Statements by members. Déclaration de député. La députée de Montcalm.
Monsieur le Président.
The honourable member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, there will be, I'm talking about an initiative in the Parliament of Canada. We want to underscore the profound friendship between the people of Quebec and the people of Cuba. One of the citizens in Montcalm has been kept in Cuba after he had an accident on an excursion with his family. He did nothing wrong. Even the tribunal in Cuba said he was the victim of a judicial error. Mr. Ben Amish, who is an exemplary citizen, is in this situation. This is why we would like to participate in the event tomorrow to support him, and we invite all members of the House who care about justice to come and stand in solidarity with Mr. Ben Amish and his family. Congratulations to the community and these community champions for making this community the best in Canada.
The honourable member for Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honoured today to pay tribute to Mr. Bob Porter, who passed away last week in Medicine Hat. Mr. Porter was a rancher, a community leader, a family man, and a member of Parliament from 1984 to 1993. He never sought fame or headlines, but didn't shy away from speaking truth to power or standing up for his constituents. Bob came from a pioneer family that settled in southern Alberta in 1883. He took the reins of the family ranch at 18 and built a strong business as committed and dedicated stewards of the land. Bob focused on strengthening his community through volunteering with the Kinsmen, his church, the Stampede Board, the Stock Growers, Cattle Commission, Press Council, Community Foundation, and many, many others. Despite how busy he was, he always made time for family. Bob was a strong voice for farmers, speaking his mind, voting his conscience, and pushing for common sense changes. He fought U.S. trade barriers, he stood up for law-abiding gun owners, and he always put the safety of Canadians first. He was a friend who offered encouragement and guidance to me as a new MP. May we all aspire to make Canada better and leave a legacy like that of Mr. Bob Porter. I join with my wife, my community, my riding, and my colleagues in sending thoughts and prayers to Bob's family. This country could certainly use more of Mr. Bob Porter's.
L'honorable député de Marc-Aurèle-Fortin.
The honourable member for Marc-Aurèle-Fortin. Mr. Speaker, on August 10th and 11th, I had the opportunity to visit the cadet training camp in Bagotville, which includes Air Force, Navy, and Army cadets. It's offered, it's free, and this program is one of the best programs, one of the best leadership programs in Canada. By focusing on physical fitness and civic virtues, this program helps young Canadians to become active and engaged community members, and it prepares them to take up their future responsibilities. thank you to young cadets for their warm welcome. You are examples of courage and determination. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, last evening I was made aware of the latest reprehensible action by this government against the charter rights of Canadian Fusian Abdelrazik. Mr. Abdelrazik was in Sudan in 2003 visiting his ailing mother when he was arrested by that country's notorious security service. A 2009 federal court judgment revealed that CSIS was complicit in his arrest and subsequent prolonged and unlawful detention and torture. Finally released, Canada refused him a passport so he could return to Canada, and Mr. Abdelrazik was never charged or convicted of any offence. He required a federal court order based on a violation of his constitutionally guaranteed right to mobility to finally reunite with his family. He filed a lawsuit exercising his right to compensation for violation of his charter rights. 9 years later, and on the eve of his court hearing, this government, which claims to defend charter rights, moved to have the trial adjourned indefinitely. 3 successive governments are complicit in these violations. I call on this government to end their obstructive tactics and provide Mr. Abdelrazik with the redress that is his basic right.
Honourable Member for Don Valley East.
Mr. Speaker, a warm welcome back to you and all my colleagues in the House. Over the summer, I knocked on many doors, held many coffee meets and greets, and attended many community events in my riding of Don Valley East. These interactions enabled me to gauge the real progress our government has made for the middle class. Parents told me about the positive impact of the Canada Child Benefit they receive. In my riding alone, our investment has lifted more than 17,000 children out of poverty. This year alone, our Canada Summer Jobs program has enabled 230 students in my riding to gain valuable work experience while making a difference in their local communities. The students I met were thrilled with the opportunity to work and learn. I am pleased to report that there is real progress in Don Valley East. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Perth Wellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to pay tribute to Gordon Young, who passed away last week at the age of 80. Gordon's life was a life of service. He was a charter member of the Moncton Optimist Club and spent years as both a board member and volunteer with the Galbraith Optimist Camp for Kids. He was a 4-H leader and a member of many agricultural organizations, including the Farm Safety Organization, Perth Huron Jersey Club, the Perth County Soil and Crop Association, and the Perth County Milk Producers. And he was a municipal councillor, first in the former township of Logan, and later he was served for more than a decade as a councillor with the amalgamated municipality of West Perth. During our shared time together on West Perth Council, I got to know Gordon for his thoughtful comments, his subtle sense of humor, and his efficiency at chairing meetings. Gordon held the record for the quickest meetings at our council meetings. To his wife Helen, his daughters Lori and Lisa, and his grandchildren, I offered my deepest condolences on his loss and our collective thanks for a life well lived. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Montarville. Mr. Speaker, artists are important links in our society. They define our popular culture and they leave a mark on our collective imagination. They move us deeply with their contemplation, spirituality, and even political discourse. Mr. Speaker, artists are visionaries who reflect the many facets of our society. They allow us to explore our world through poetry, painting, sculpture, music, and I could go on. This is why I invite all the citizens of Saint-Bruno to the 11th Arts Circuit in Saint-Bruno on 22 and 23 September next. This activity is organized by the Association of Artists of the South Shore, and it allows art lovers to discover homegrown talent. I wish you all the very best.
August Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Father Angelo Sat. Hundreds recently gathered in Mississauga to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Father Angelo's service as a Coptic Orthodox priest. Father Angelos has dedicated his life to serving the Church of the Virgin Mary and St. Athanasius and the broader community. Abuna Angelos has been instrumental in building churches, food banks, daycare centers, summer camps, communal housing, professional training workshops, and an Egyptian museum, just to name a few of his accomplishments. He is a humble and selfless leader who helps those in need, regardless of their faith, background, and status. He's also an effective advocate for the fundamental rights of Copts in Egypt and around the world to live in peace and to practice their faith with dignity. On behalf of all Canadians and Egyptian Copts everywhere, I would like to thank Abuna for his service and thank his family for sharing him with the rest of us.
The honourable member for Carleton.
The free enterprise system has extended opportunity to more people than any other system ever conceived, Mr. Speaker, and the Horatio Alger Association seeks to expand its blessings to those who are less fortunate. This week, we had among us 3 of the recipients of the Horatio Alger Association Scholarship, worth $10,000 each, and providing prestigious recognition to some of the young people who've overcome the greatest hardship to succeed. On behalf of the House of Commons, I'd like to congratulate Catherine Key, Jonah Larson, Jasmine Boisclair on earning these scholarships and on participating in a roundtable public discussion with former Governor General David Johnston on how we can extend these opportunities yet further. Finally, I'd like to thank the Horatio Alger Society for educating young people about the genius and the extraordinary accomplishments of the free market system. May we all share in its blessings. Thank you.
L'honorable député d'Ottawa.
The honourable member for Ottawa-Vanier.
Speak about investments in water and wastewater infrastructure that keep our environment and our communities clean and safe. Je veux souligner ici.
I want to underscore a project of ours that the people of Ottawa-Vanier will be able to benefit from.
Renewal project as part of the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund. By doing this, our government is reducing risk of flooding and protecting the livelihood of nearby residents while supporting a clean economy. These investments are also important to the greater region as they help ensure that harmful substances and materials stay out of our waterways. Ces projets protègent la santé.
These projects protect health and well-being, as well as local waterways and ecosystems, while creating middle-class jobs and supporting economic development in our city.
Understands that the economy and the environment work together hand in hand. Thank you.
The honourable member for Mount Royal.
Mr. Speaker, tonight Jewish Canadians and Jews around the world will begin to observe the holiest day in the Hebrew calendar, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement.
The Day of Atonement is the 10th and last day following the Jewish New Year, and is an opportunity to reflect, repent, and ask for forgiveness.
With friends and family, and together work towards each being a better person and better member of the community. It is also a time to celebrate the important role that Jewish Canadians have played over the last 268 years and will continue to play in building a stronger, greater Canada. Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask all my colleagues to join me in wishing all those observing Yom Kippur a Gemar Chatimat Tova. Let people of all faiths join together to build a happier and more harmonious world.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Saturday was World Marrow Donor Day. C'est une journée pour reconnaître et
This is a day to thank those who have donated bone marrow for transplantation.
2.5 years ago, when our nephew Lincoln was diagnosed with aplastic anemia, meaning that a simple cold or a cut could kill him, his only hope was a bone marrow transplant. Against all odds, a match was found. One match in the entire world. An anonymous stranger took the time to sign up, went through testing, and agreed to donate her bone marrow. Those acts of selfless kindness saved his life. This week, we found out her name, Anne. So to Anne and all those donors, we say thank you. You are our heroes. Vous êtes nos héros.
You are our heroes.
Canadians between the ages of 17 and 35 to go to blood.ca to find out how they can register to be a donor. It only takes a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, and it can save other lives just like Lincoln's. Thank you.
member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Manitoba is facing a crisis. Last year, there were 35 overdose deaths from methamphetamine in our province, more than both fentanyl and carfentanil. In the past 4 years, use among adults has doubled and use among youth has increased by 50%. There are regular reports of drug-induced psychosis that have led to significant increases in violent crime, stray needles, posing substantial health risks to our public areas and strains on our public health system. It's a problem that spans from urban centres to small rural towns and Indigenous communities from coast to coast to coast. We need to take action and we need to work together to address this issue. I am pleased that the Health Committee unanimously agreed to my motion to study the impacts of methamphetamine abuse in Canada and to develop concrete recommendations for the federal government, the provinces and territories. I look forward to working with my colleagues so we can make a difference for Canadians and address this crisis.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Mr. Speaker, as is the case in many regions in Quebec, dairy farmers in my area are in a terrible situation with the uncertainty created by NAFTA negotiations. Let me tell you about Camille Allen of Clérici, who spent her life on the family farm and is presently studying farm management in order to one day take over the family farm. She's afraid, Mr. Speaker, afraid that the family farm will be sold or dismantled because the government has authorized a breach in supply management. She's afraid of seeing years of investment sacrifice and all their dreams go up in smoke because the government seems incapable of protecting them. Camille and the farmers of Abitibi-Témiscamingue are counting on us, and this government cannot just betray them. The new generation of farmers is precious. We have to think about the future of agriculture and our farms. The Honourable Member of Chicoutimi-Lafieur. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take advantage of my first statement in order to thank the people in my riding who elected me, to thank them for have given me their trust. My riding has sent a clear message. 53% preferred our party to the Liberals. My fellow citizens are afraid of the effects of legalizing marijuana and worried about the state of public finance. They want economic development, and the farmers who are the pride of our region are afraid of the concessions to come on supply management. I'm very happy to finally sit in this House so that the government can account for its summer of failure. The riding of Chicoutimi-Lafieur, just like the member of Aurora Oak Ridges Richmond Hill, has lost confidence in the Liberal government. In 2019, Mr. Speaker, Canadians will demonstrate their loss of confidence from coast to coast to coast.
L'honorable député d'Oil-Aylmer.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
An Urban Transit Association to Ottawa for their Transit Awareness Day. Les réseaux de transport en commun.
We want an effective and reliable public transit system. It plays a role in the lives of millions of Canadians. We have designed and implemented a plan of investment and infrastructure which meets the needs of Canadians. In my riding, we're looking forward to the LTR. Canada's and Quebec's investment will allow us to bring about this project. We'll be able to take a light rail to go to work or university or go shopping.
In the future to build sustainable communities. Il me fait plaisir d'accueillir les...
It is a pleasure to welcome the members of the CUTA and to welcome them and to thank them.
Questions orales, oral questions, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are going to be paying some $3 million in countervailed amounts, and this money could have gone to steel workers, aluminum workers, and to Canadians, but we now know that only $11,000 have been distributed. This is another example of a failure by the Prime Minister. We can't rely on his lovely words when he said he was going to be there for workers. Why is the Prime Minister not sending money directly to these workers? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I've said over the course of the year, we are there to support workers in the steel and aluminum sectors and in all sectors across the country. We have put forth measures to help them as needed, and we will continue to ensure, by working to diversify our economy, to support innovation and our workers in the steel and aluminum sectors. We will continue to defend those industries from irresponsible and punitive measures by the United States. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the recent decision on Trans Mountain has shown that Liberals have, and I quote, failed significantly. In other words, the Prime Minister promised to improve things, but broke the promise as his earliest convenience. That should be very familiar to Canadians. After 3 years of false promises and racking up the failures, why should we have confidence in this Prime Minister for the building of a new pipeline? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the 10 years of failure under the Harper government. They refused to accept to protect the environment, that it refused to acknowledge that went hand in hand with economic growth. In addition, they continued to marginalize Aboriginal communities, and for the past 3 years they've been criticizing us because we're doing too much in terms of the environment, because we're doing too much in terms of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, what the court has just said is that we need to do more, and that is exactly what we're going to do. We know that protecting the environment...
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister seems to be the only person that thinks that things are going well in Canada's energy sector. The judge ruled very clearly this Prime Minister failed to do proper consultation. And where he failed, Conservatives succeeded. 4 major pipeline projects built. The Enbridge And on the Kinder Morgan Anchor Loop, Mr. Speaker, this increased the ability of Canadian producers and marketers to access growing markets on the West Coast as well as Asian markets. That's from a Kinder Morgan statement, because that pipeline opened up...
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for 10 years they were unable to get our resources to new markets. And the reason they were unable, despite everything they tried, is they thought the way to get things built to new markets was by eliminating environmental oversight, or obstacles as they'd say, and continuing to marginalize Indigenous peoples. We know that growing the economy goes hand in hand with protecting the environment and with reconciliation. That's exactly what we're doing to grow our economy and protect Canadians for the future.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It is this Prime Minister who has destroyed real economic opportunity for First Nations people when he cancelled Northern Gateway and ripped that opportunity away from so many Northern Indigenous communities. It is this Prime Minister that has made Canada more dependent on foreign energy by killing Energy East. So we have to continue importing oil from places like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. But it was the Conservative government that got pipelines built, that got our energy to foreign markets. Why does this Prime Minister have it in for Canada's energy sector?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
If anyone in this place or anyone across this country needed proof that the Conservatives don't know what they're talking about when it comes to Indigenous peoples, citing the end of the Northern Gateway Pipeline as something that went against Indigenous peoples proves that they are hopelessly out of touch with the concerns of Indigenous peoples. Yes, there are voices in Indigenous communities on all sides of the debate. But the fact that Conservative government did not respect Indigenous voices is why they couldn't get things built.
Only Tuesday. Order, order, order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's summer failure has also included his carbon tax coalition falling apart in tatters. But even before Rachel Notley pulled out and abandoned the carbon tax plan, this Prime Minister abandoned his own plan. He announced that he would give big businesses and big emitters with big government relations experts a special deal. They would be exempted to up to almost 90% of their emissions. Meanwhile, individual hardworking families will have to bear the entire brunt. When will the Prime Minister finally do the right thing, join the millions of Canadians who are clamoring?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we understand how important it is to fight climate change while building a strong economy for the future and good jobs for Canadians over the coming generations. That means we agree that putting a price on pollution, making sure that polluters pay, is the best way to move forward. Now, the Conservatives do not have a plan to fight climate change, won't tell us what they plan to do. We just know they're offering the same 10 years of Stephen Harper of doing nothing on the environment.
L'Honorable.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-les-Basques. Mr. Speaker, in October 2015, the Prime Minister decried the fact that the TPP was negotiated in secret. In October 2015, the Prime Minister stated that he would never touch supply management. No concessions. Dairy producers in my region and across the country depend on supply management, and they're telling me just how essential it is for the survival of their family farms. Can the Prime Minister tell us what's changed? What changed between 2015 and now? Can he commit to fully protecting supply management? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I've said for years, almost a decade, the Liberal government, my party, the Liberal Party, will always defend supply management. We all agree on that on this side of the House. It's not the same for all parties, but we know just how well it works. It's a system that protects our farmers and consumers, and we are going to continue to defend supply management and dairy producers. The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-les-Basques. 2 weeks ago, I went to Saint-Mathieu-de-Rieux to the Charles family farm. They've been dairy producers for 31 years. They work tirelessly day in, day out, and they estimate their salary at $5.50 an hour. Now, Charles talked about the concessions made to supply management under the Conservatives and the Liberals in the free trade agreement with Europe and the TPP, and said that it's in fact weakened and jeopardized his family's economic situation. Can the Prime Minister, who promised not to touch supply management in 2015, keep his promise instead of being so vague? Mr. Speaker, we will continue to defend supply management. It is a system that works for producers, for dairy producers, for consumers in Canada. We've signed international agreements protecting the system, and we will continue to defend a system that works for Canadians and that works for our farmers.
For Essex.
On October 4th, 2015, the Prime Minister said on television that the TPP should never be negotiated in secret. And now he's signing on to a deal that he negotiated in secret. The Prime Minister also told Canadians that he'd never compromise on supply management. And now his government is doing exactly that and trading it away. Mr. Speaker, farmers are scared they're going to lose their family farms. When will this Prime Minister start keeping his pre-election promises and stop using these farmers' livelihoods as a bargaining chip?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Many times, Mr. Speaker, in this House and out of it, we will continue to defend supply management. But I think with the CPTPP moving forward through the House this week, I'm happy to highlight the fact that, indeed, the deal as it was signed by the Conservative government was not good enough for Canadians. That's why we continue to negotiate. We made significant positioning in Da Nang and with our partners so that we would get to an improved deal that included things like a cultural exemption that the Conservatives, for example, were willing to give away in TPP. We know how to stand up for Canadians, and we always will.
The Honourable Member for Essex.
I'm not sure the Prime Minister understands what they've signed on to. The Trans-Pacific Partnership will be a blow to Windsor-Essex, and people in my region are begging the Liberals to hold off on pushing through this job-killing trade deal. I met with small business owners over the summer who warned they are being slammed by steel tariffs and may be forced to shut down. Yesterday, I called on the Liberals to delay the CPTPP so Canadians can brace for a possible failed NAFTA and more U.S. tariffs. Instead, they're steamrolling the deal through Parliament without proper debate. Why are the Liberals hell-bent on killing Canadian manufacturing jobs?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we find ourselves in a very familiar situation in this House. The NDP don't want any deals for Canadians, don't want to sign any trade deals. The Conservatives are willing to sign anything they can. We know that only signing good deals for Canadians is in our best interest. As with CPTPP, when it comes to NAFTA, we will sign a good deal or we will not sign.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, in just under a month, the Prime Minister will legalize marijuana across the country, to the pleasure of his friends in this sector. In the meantime, police forces have stated that they're ill-equipped, not adequately trained, and they're simply not ready. The Prime Minister hasn't listened to municipalities, experts, doctors, and above all, he hasn't listened to the police services. How can he justify yet another failure and make Canadian families pay? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to assure this House that I've met regularly with the law enforcement leadership of this country, and unlike the previous government, we actually listened to what they asked of us. They asked, for example, for the opportunity to give a ticket to a young person rather than criminalize them for simple possession of marijuana. Mr. Speaker, we listened. They didn't. They asked for the technology and the training needed to keep our roadways safe dealing with impaired driving. We gave them what they asked for. And, Mr. Speaker, I've met with law enforcement across this country. They're working diligently. They'll be ready to keep our community safe.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Arthabaska. In addition to government failures in negotiating NAFTA, we're now heading towards another major conflict with our U.S. ally on the issue of legalized marijuana. Jean-Pierre Rancourt, a lawyer who he practices in the States, says that Canadians could be denied entry into the United States. Can the Prime Minister guarantee all Canadians who use marijuana, once it's legalized, that they will be able to enter the U.S.? Or will this be another failure that he'll have to bear?
Border security.
Mr. Speaker, I simply remind this House that since 2013, we have had a well-regulated medical marijuana industry which employs tens of thousands of Canadians and which Canadians have invested hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet it's had no impact on their ability to cross the border. We have entered into discussions with our counterparts in the United States to ensure that Canadians are treated fairly and according to the rule of law when they cross into the United States.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister informed us that as soon as he was appointed, he requested a meeting with his U.S. counterpart to undertake discussions on the Safe Third Country agreement. Unfortunately, the Americans have already confirmed that those discussions took place, and perhaps the Prime Minister forgot to mention that to his new minister. At any rate, in the meantime, illegal immigrants are mocking our laws. People are being called racist if they criticize the Prime Minister, and so this Liberal failure continues. We have a plan. They don't have a plan. When will they fix the Safe Third Country agreement?
Honourable Minister of Border Security.
Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear. As I indicated yesterday, Canada has a long and proud tradition of providing protection to those who are most in need of protection by providing refuge to the world's most vulnerable people. The Immigration and Refugee Protection Act requires the ongoing review of all designated safe third countries to ensure the conditions that led to their designation continue to be met. As per my mandate, I have already sent a letter to Secretary Nielsen asking to enter into discussions related to irregular border migration of our shared border, including ways in which we can enhance and improve the existing safe third country.
The
Honourable Member. Well, Mr. Speaker, as we can see that the Liberal summer of failures just keeps going and going. Now, we learned that discussions had already been undertaken to change the Safe Third Country Agreement, but there are people entering illegally, and they're trying to negotiate what we've been proposing since the outset. So we've got ministers going to Washington to make fun of the U.S. administration, a prime minister negotiating agreements with cultural arguments. When are we going to see a resolution to this problem with the Safe Third Country agreement? Mr. Speaker, contrary to the Harper Conservatives, we make decisions based on facts and data. Data from Julia 2018 show that the number of interceptions at the border was half of what it was last year. Under the Harper Conservatives, they continue to politicize the issue by recommending for a militarized situation at the border. We need to stop this misinformation. We are going to honor international commitments and the security of Canadians at the same time.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
We didn't have an illegal border crossing crisis under Prime Minister Harper, Mr. Speaker. For any other Canadian telling their boss that they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on a problem that got worse would mean that they would get fired. So when this Prime Minister stands here and tells Canadians that he spent hundreds of millions of their tax dollars on illegal border crossers, but their numbers continue to grow, it's clear by this failure that he needs to go. How many illegal border crossers are currently being housed in hotels at taxpayer expense?
Honourable Minister of Immigration.
I'll educate the honourable member on the disastrous record of immigration. Parents and grandparents had a backlog of 167,000. We've reduced that to 25,000. Spouses had to wait 26 months to reunite. We've reduced that from 75,000 to 15,000. And living caregivers who provide an invaluable service to Canadians had to wait 5 to 7 years under that party. We've reduced their backlog from 62,000 to 11,000. They had a disastrous record, and Canadians know that.
Order. Frequently in this House, members will hear things they disagree with or that they're dissatisfied with. They should expect that, I'm sure, by now, and members should be able to contain themselves and not react until it's their turn, which they get eventually. The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Let's talk about education, Mr. Speaker. It has been under this government that Canadians have lost social license for immigration because of that minister's failure to close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement. It has been this Prime Minister and this minister that is putting ahead people who have reached upstate New York instead of reuniting Yazidi genocide victims, Mr. Speaker. It's been this government who over and over again have prioritized people who are not legitimate refugees over the world's most vulnerable. When will this government close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement?
Order. The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, let's talk about Yazidi refugees. They brought a grand total of 3 Yazidis to Canada. We've brought 1,400 Yazidi survivors of Daesh to Canada, Mr. Speaker, and we're encouraging private sponsors to bring even more. Let's talk about private-sponsored refugees that meet the generosity of Canadians. When it came time to meet and fulfill the generosity of Canadians, they only had 4,500.
Order. Order. I didn't hear anyone yelling when the member for Garwick-Nose Hill was asking her question. I would ask her not to do so either. I think all members know better than that. So I'd ask the Honourable Minister of Immigration to finish his answer.
In order to meet the generosity of Canadians, we have increased the private-sponsored refugee program spaces to 18,000, Mr. Speaker. That is our record, Mr. Speaker. They couldn't do it. We're getting it done.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont, La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to tell you how people from Rosemont, La Petite Patrie reacted to the purchasing of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Richard Cote said, this purchase appears to be the worst waste of public funds in the history of Canada. Mathieu Fillon said, imagine 2 seconds if the government had invested this money in promising investments for the environment and energy of the future. We could have been world leaders. And that is exactly what should have been done. When will the Liberals start taking climate change and jobs of the future seriously? The Honourable Minister of Finance. We know how important it is to have access to international markets. That's why we considered the situation with the Trans Mountain Pipeline and the extension. We have considered the facts from the decision with the court to ensure that we can have an interaction with Indigenous peoples and focus on the environment. That is our plan. It's an important approach. We will continue with our approach. The Honourable Member. Their process was twisted and the court put them in place. That's what happened. But it's not just in Montreal Island where people are concerned. In Salaberry-sur-Roi, where the Enbridge 9B pipeline runs, people are very concerned. Required corrective measures are ignored. Safety valves aren't to code. And the NEB is protecting the oil company and refusing to even answer information requests from the RCM. Imagine if Energy East were brought back. Are the Liberals working for the people of Canada or big oil? The answer is pretty clear when we see the Minister of the Environment doing barbecues with an Enbridge apron on. Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about international markets, that's what's important, and that's why we've taken a look at the situation with Trans Mountain. We know that it's important to look at considerations of Indigenous peoples. We have committed to doing so. Of course, it's very important to also consider the environment, and we are. It's important to have an approach and a plan. We have a plan for the situation and to continue with the pipeline.
Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister described his failure on the Trans Mountain expansion as, quote, almost a really good thing. Only Liberal logic would say it's a good thing that their failure cost thousands of workers their jobs. 2,000 families lost good-paying jobs and now are stressed about their uncertain futures. This is not almost a really good thing. It's been 3 weeks. A really good thing would be to tell these families what the plan is to get their jobs back. So where's the plan for the Trans Mountain expansion?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, the decision to ignore the impact of the marine traffic on the environment was done by the Harper government. The decision to ignore the protection of endangered species was made under the Harper government. Court has acknowledged that we put a framework together that was acceptable. We need to engage with Indigenous peoples in a way that is meaningful. There is two-way dialogue that allows us to find mitigation where it's possible to do so. That is exactly the plan we are putting forward.
Member for Lakeland.
Whenever he fails, he just blames others. But former Toronto Liberal MP and two-time Liberal leadership candidate Martha Hall-Finley, she agrees the Liberals are failing. She said Bill C-69 is, quote, deeply flawed. And now is not the time to pass legislation that could make our investment climate even worse. The Liberals killed 3 private sector pipelines. Their failure stalled Trans Mountain. 100,000 energy workers lost their jobs and hundreds of thousands more are at risk. Billions of investment is leaving Canada. Will the Prime Minister scrap his no new pipeline bill, C-69, before he completely obliterates obliterates the Canadian energy sector.
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, if Harper Conservatives were in power today, there would be no TMX because they're against the purchase that we made in workers, in getting our resources to the global markets, and making sure that jobs are created for Albertans and for British Columbians. We're going to move forward on this project in the right way, respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples to be meaningfully consulted, at the same time protecting the environment. That is the path forward that we are developing, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, the government's Trans Mountain failure has real consequences for Indigenous peoples. Chief Ernie Cray of GM First Nations had this to say: "What we negotiated will be lasting training and lasting jobs. Our young people every day come to me and say they want to get trained, they want a job, and they want to say goodbye to welfare. To us, it means millions of dollars to my band alone. More casualties from the Prime Minister's summer of failure. When will they present a plan to get Trans Mountain built?"
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, one thing that is absolutely clear from this ruling is that in order to build large energy infrastructure projects, you cannot ignore your constitutional obligations to properly consult with Indigenous peoples. And you also cannot ignore your obligations to protect the environment. We will be coming back with a plan that will allow us to protect the environment, respect Indigenous people's rights to be included, at the same time grow our economy and create middle-class jobs.
The Honourable Member for Halliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Mr. Speaker, a strong Alberta energy sector creates jobs right across Canada. For example, when the Prime Minister killed Energy East, 300 jobs were lost at a GE plant in Peterborough. After a summer of failure, this government's bungling of Trans Mountain jeopardizes many more Ontario manufacturing jobs. This government is failing Canadians as investment flees Canada. This government is failing Canadians as families lose the means to keep food on their table. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister finally present a plan to Canadians to get Trans Mountain built?
Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, let me share some numbers. 3,600 jobs created by Amazon, 295 new jobs created by Burloak Technologies, 675 new jobs created by Stem Cell Technologies, 300 new jobs created by Bell Helicopter, Mr. Speaker, 1,250 jobs created by Sanofi, 4,000 jobs created by Encore, 2,200 jobs created by Nova Chemicals in Alberta. That's getting the job done, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
When the Prime Minister came to Nanaimo, the air was choked with smoke. He heard climate change worsens wildfires. He heard coastal people warn increased oil tanker spill risk. Some called it a national disaster. He didn't listen. Just a week later, the Liberals bought the pipeline just as the courts were shutting its expansion down. When will this government finally listen to coastal communities, shelve the climate change hypocrisy, and cancel the Kinder Morgan expansion?
Bravo. Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, our government has an ambitious plan to protect the environment and grow the economy at the same time. Our emissions are dropping and Canadians have created over 500,000 jobs in the past few years. Mr. Speaker, we are moving forward with putting a price on pollution, investing in the green economy, and if the NDP can't get on board with growing our economy while we put forward aggressive measures to protect our environment, then they're going to find themselves in opposition for a very long time.
Order. The Honourable Member for Port Moody, Coquitlam. Order.
You don't answer your Prime Minister like that. How come you don't answer your Prime Minister like that?
Last week, Canadians were devastated when Scarlet, a 3.5-year-old orca, was declared dead. Coastal communities and people right across the country continue to voice their concerns on the effect of increased tanker traffic on our coast, but the Liberals aren't listening. Instead of acting to protect this endangered species now, the Liberals are in court defending their inaction and continue to push for the expansion of Trans Mountain. Canadians don't want to see another orca die. Will this minister issue an emergency order now and protect these whales?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, ensuring the protection of Canada's oceans and the sustainability of marine life are key priorities for our government. Our government is committed to the protection of Canada's resident killer whales and the recovery of these populations. Our government is working in partnership with Indigenous peoples, key stakeholders, international partners, and the province of British Columbia on immediate actions to reduce the impact of marine shipping and assist in the recovery of the southern resident killer whales. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Sackville-Preston-Chesapeake. Mr. Speaker, just like all across the country, students in my riding of Sackville-Preston-Chesapeake went back to school recently. Many parents proudly opt to send their children to a French language education program, like French Immersion, or a French language program in an official language minority community. And they do this because they want their children to be bilingual. They want their children to speak both official languages. They're proud of our history, and they want their children to have new opportunities. So can the Minister of Official Languages tell us how the Official Languages Action Plan is supporting these programs? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of La Francophonie. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had the opportunity to develop an excellent action plan on official languages. We invested $2.7 billion in official languages, which is the largest investment in that subject in history. We want to preserve and promote the rights of official language minority communities, and that is why we are investing in our children and in education to ensure that those official language minority communities will be sustainable.
Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Liberals' summer of failure included a stop in Saskatchewan. One failure top of mind for Saskatchewanians is the Liberals' carbon tax grab. The Liberals are continuing their attack on hardworking families and struggling seniors with their unaffordable carbon tax. Will the Prime Minister stop punishing Saskatchewan by imposing a federal carbon tax and recognize the authority of the province?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, the environment is a priority for this government, and we will not apologize for putting a price on pollution. The fact is the cost of inaction is too great to ignore. By 2020, Canadians are going to be bearing almost $5 billion as a result of extreme weather events such as forest fires and floods. Mr. Speaker, we need to move forward with a plan to protect the economy and grow the economy and protect the environment at the same time. Under the Harper Conservatives, they failed to put a plan in action. They still have no plan today, and I am shocked, and I'm sure you'll join me in my disappointment if their plan is to make pollution free.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, the summer of failure is continuing for the Liberals. Yesterday, in an interview with Maclean's, the Prime Minister said very clearly that regardless of what happens, he will impose the Liberal carbon tax. And in doing so, he's defying the will of some of the provinces. And, worse, he's hiding information from Canadian families. Can the Prime Minister at least once tell the truth to Canadians? He has the document. Can he tell Canadians how much the Liberal carbon tax will cost them? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Our preference to work with the provinces and territories, but when provinces will not take the responsibility of protecting the environment, then we will put forward a plan that ensures every Canadian is taking part in a framework that puts a price on pollution. Mr. Speaker, if there is anything that's being hidden here, it is the Conservatives' plan. I'd invite all the Canadians that would like to see what their plan is to check out the Conservative leader's platform he ran on during their convention if he hadn't deleted it from his website after he had won. Mr. Speaker, they have no plan. We will grow the economy. We will protect the environment at the same time. It's what Canadians expect, it's what they deserve, and it's what we will deliver to them.
Order. The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in fact, this government does believe that pollution should be absolutely free if you've got a powerful lobbyist. One of the fine print details in their carbon tax plan is that large corporate industrial polluters will not have to pay it on 80 to 90% of their emissions, even though single moms and seniors will pay it on 100% of their home heating and gas bills that they pay just for the luxury of going to work in the morning, Mr. Speaker. Why is it that this party of privilege, whenever it proposes new taxes, it always exempts its wealthy friends?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, it seems the Conservatives have no plan for the environment. The NDP have no plan for the economy. We are moving forward with a plan that's going to grow the economy and protect the environment at the same time. We are putting in measures that puts a price on pollution so it is not free for emitters, but we're also recognizing that certain trade-exposed industries need to remain competitive in the global marketplace. Mr. Speaker, we are moving forward with a plan that will make life more affordable for Canadians and more expensive for polluters.
Order. I remind the honourable member for Edmonton Manning that we each get our turn here eventually, and one waits till they have their turn before speaking. The honourable member for Carleton.
Well, this has been a summer of tax fairness failure for this particular government. Not only, we all knew that middle-class families are paying $800 more in income taxes under this government, but we learned that the wealthiest taxpayers, the 1%, are paying $4.5 billion less, according to CRA data. Wouldn't it then just be predictable that they would hit working-class families with higher carbon taxes while giving an exemption to those well-lobbied for industrial polluters? Why is it that wealthy Liberal insiders always get the breaks?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
I know that the member for Carleton wouldn't knowingly mislead this House. Perhaps what he's trying to just refer to, though, is the fact that we raise taxes on the top 1%. Maybe that's what he's referring to. Because if he actually looks carefully at what we've done, we lowered taxes on middle-class Canadians. So they're in better shape. And if he takes into account the Canada Child Benefit, what you can see is that Canadian families, average middle-class families in 2019, will be $2,000 better off than they were in 2015. These are the facts, Mr. Speaker. We would be happy to give him a briefing if you'd like to understand them better.
Honourable member for Courtney Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, I learned of a veteran who's been waiting for over a year for treatment of glaucoma. One of thousands of veterans waiting on claims just to be opened, processed, and then to actually receive the benefits they deserve. The Conservatives failed to spend over $1 billion in 7 years allocated for veterans, and now we know that the Liberals have left yet another $375 million unspent in just 3 years. That's enough money to clear the growing backlog of veterans that are tired of waiting. How can the Liberals justify failing to spend this money on the veterans who need it the most?
Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Sure, and we will ensure that veterans receive all the benefits that they have earned. In fact, it is our top priority. As I said yesterday, our benefits are demand-driven, so whether it's 10 or whether it's 10,000, we'll always make sure that eligible veterans come forward and they will receive the benefits to which they are entitled. They are based on estimates, and this process guarantees that whether a veteran comes forward this year or next year or the year after, we'll always have the resources available for our veterans. I would only ask, Mr. Speaker, and I would encourage the NDP to look inward at their plan for veterans, or lack thereof.
The honourable member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of looking inward, people with disabilities have been waiting for far too long for a National Accessibility Act. And Canadians were disappointed when Liberals' legislation was tabled with no timeline, no requirements in services as important as via rail could ask for an exemption from this act. They could actually ask for an exemption. So for each of us, each member in this House, knowing that we have to face people living with disabilities, people who face barriers every single day on a daily basis, we're with them.
The Honourable Minister of Accessibility.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am so proud that tomorrow we are commencing debate and second reading of Bill C-81, the Accessibility Act. I can tell you that, in my opinion, this is the most significant piece of disability rights legislation since the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Mr. Speaker, I'm excited to be working with the member opposite on this bill. I'm excited that we can get it to committee tomorrow as soon as possible so we can make it as substantively great as we possibly can to include the full participation and inclusion of every Canadian in our society.
Honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has a serious ethics problem. He is the first Prime Minister in the history of our country to be found guilty of breaking ethics laws. His Minister of Finance guilty of breaking ethics laws. And now, during his summer of failure, his most trusted cabinet minister and his close childhood friend was also found guilty of breaking ethics laws. Guilty. 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 Will the Prime Minister finally act and fire his close friend, or does he truly believe his friends and all Liberals are above the law?
Minister of Intergovernmental and Northern Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, as the Ethics Commissioner said, in this case there was no preferential treatment given and there was no financial benefit derived. Mr. Speaker, my colleague manufactures great indignation. He talks about people who should, in fact, be found to have not followed the law. He doesn't mention a guy who was in this House called Dean Del Mastro, who, in fact, Mr. Speaker, left in a sheriff's van with handcuffs and leg irons on for not following the law. Where was the manufactured outrage at that point?
Order. Order. I'd ask members on both sides to come to order. The honourable member for Thornhill.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government is becoming notorious for its flagrant disregard of ethical practices, and in their summer of failure, for its failure to abide by the Prime Minister's promises of accountable government. The PM and his ministers are shameless in the face of accumulating conflict of interest violations. Shameless now, caught in their breaking their own rules, allowing registered lobbyists to buy their way into exclusive Liberal fundraising events for access to government decision-makers ordinary citizens don't have. Mr. Speaker, why do Liberals think the law is for everyone else?
Honourable Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we're proud to have brought forward Bill C-50, and we're proud to be taking concrete actions to disclose even more information than has ever been done before when it comes to fundraising. However, Mr. Speaker, what we don't know is who's attending Conservative fundraising events. For example, the $1,525 event that was held on July 28, 2016, or perhaps the $1,550 fundraiser that was held on June 21st, 2017, or perhaps, Mr. Speaker, the $1,525 event that was held on April 21st, 2016. Mr. Speaker, who is attending their events? What do they have to hide? Thank you.
The honourable member for Lévis. Order. Order. The honourable member for Lévis-Lobinière. Mr. Speaker, during this summer of failure, the Liberals' priority wasn't working for our country's economic development, but rather, once again, it was garden parties and private access clubs that fundraise for the Liberal Party. They've shown no remorse after all of these years of breaking the ethics rules and letting ministers help their cronies. Mr. Speaker, given this long list of privileged access and cronyism, when will the Liberals be fair and transparent when it comes to their fundraising? Honourable Minister of Democratic Institutions. Mr. Speaker, I am very proud of what we've done on this side of the House with Bill C-50, and we are comfortable with our fundraising. What we don't know is who is attending the Conservative Party fundraising events. Mr. Speaker, what do they have to hide? They had a $1,525 fundraising event Or I could mention June 21st, 2017, where they had a fundraising event that cost $1,550. What do they have to hide, and why are they not transparent?
The honourable member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Kelly.
Seniors in my riding of Northumberland, Peterborough South have told me they worry about their financial security. Whether they're retired or approaching retirement, they're concerned not only about their future finances, but about the day-to-day costs they face right now. We owe Canadian seniors for their contributions to building this great country. We need to provide a quality of life we can be proud of. Can the Minister for Seniors please tell this House more about our commitment to Canadian seniors and their quality of life? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister for Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honour and a privilege to rise for the first time in this House as Minister for Seniors. And I would like to thank my honourable colleague from Northumberland, Peterborough South, for her great question. Our government will continue to work hard for seniors. We have raised 100,000 seniors out of poverty by rolling back the age of entitlement for OAS and GIS from 67 to 65. We've increased the GIS for the most vulnerable single seniors. Those seniors are receiving up to $947 more a year. We've invested $40 billion into a national housing strategy.
Member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Mr. Speaker, in parts of rural Ontario, municipalities have planned mail-in ballots for their upcoming elections, October 22nd. Their chief administration officers have raised concerns over reports of a possible postal strike. Can the Prime Minister tell this House what measures he has put into place to ensure that the elections proceed as planned?
Honourable Minister, Parliamentary Secretary for Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for a question. Our government respects and has faith in the collective bargaining process. Mediators from the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service are working with both parties to assist them in reaching an agreement. We're closely monitoring this labour dispute, and we encourage both sides to get down and get an agreement on this issue.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, the number of people with Lyme disease is increasing every year due to climate change. Like Simon, who is a citizen in my riding. He and hundreds of other people are affected by this disease in Canada. Particularly, wildlife officers and children may be affected. So why is the federal government not helping them? Where are the $4 million that were announced over a year ago to fund new research, improve diagnostic testing, and new treatments? Why make the victims of Lyme disease jump through all of these hoops when we could take action now? The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, the government recognizes that Lyme disease is a growing health problem that is affected by climate change. There are more and more cases every year. We help Canadians protect themselves against Lyme disease by raising awareness and talking about prevention. We are also training health professionals to detect this disease. Thank you.
Member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday our government moved one step closer towards the ratification process of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. This is a very significant and important step in our national trade diversification strategy. Can the Minister for International Trade and Diversification update this House on the ratification process of this important trade deal for Canadians?
Well, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my colleague from New Brunswick Southwest for her excellent committee work and for her question. We have made it clear that our government is committed to the implementation of the CPTPP. This trade agreement will open a market of 500 million consumers, which will result in growth and jobs for Canadians. We are working to diversify trade so the middle class can compete and win on the world stage. We look forward to working with all MPs to get this done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Aides-Chemin-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, in order to restore the Citadel in Quebec City, the Liberals are using a low-quality American stone when the original heritage stone is available just on the other side of the river in Lévis. According to experts, this stone does not meet the technical, geological, or heritage criteria laid out in the contract. What Why is the Prime Minister tolerating this unacceptable situation when jobs are at stake and Quebec City's standing as a World Heritage Site is threatened?
National defense.
Mr. Speaker, our government values the rich heritage of the Quebec City Citadel. That is why we are taking steps to protect it. An open and transparent process awarded a Quebec bidder of the contract to replace the damaged stone. This bidder is required to adhere to the federal guidelines to ensure that the Citadel retains its UNESCO status. National Defense is doing its due diligence to ensure that the winning stone adheres to the heritage qualifications because we understand the importance of this to Quebec City. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, the government gave the Davie Shipyard a contract for 3 icebreakers this summer. What they're not saying is that the contract is so small that Davie has had to lay off another 400 workers since then. So, nice try to look good, but we're not going to let those workers down. The Prime Minister ordered his new Minister for the Coast Guard to renew the fleet by acquiring new ships. Will he do so? And will he give the Davie Shipyard a real substantive contract this fall? Mr. Speaker, our government is getting results for Canadians by giving the Canadian Coast Guard the ships it needs to serve Canadians. This summer, we gave the Davie Shipyard a multi-million-dollar contract which will create 200 good jobs and will ensure that the Coast Guard has the ships they need. The Honourable Member for Bécancour, Nicolas Sorel. Mr. Speaker, what we're asking for is just the beginning of some compensation for a historic misuse of funds. Under the Conservatives, the federal government awarded $100 billion worth of contracts for ship and maintenance, and Quebec got barely 1% of that. The Vice President of the Davie Shipyard said, if Quebec had received its fair share, which would be at least $20 billion, we would have had full employment at the shipyard for at least a decade. Can the Liberals at least do a bit better than the Conservatives and give Quebec a respectful share of those contracts? Honourable Minister of Public Services. Mr. Speaker, we are aware of the excellent work done by the Davie Shipyard workers. This summer, we gave them a $610 million contract for 3 icebreakers. This will create up to 200 good jobs for the middle class. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Pierre Boucher des Patriotes Verchères. Mr. Speaker, there are politicians who think that they should keep their mouths shut about Trans Mountain because we receive equalization payments. Do you know how much this will cost Quebecers? We've already paid close to $1 billion, and we don't even know where it will end. It's like Muskrat Falls, a project that hurt Hydro-Quebec and is bankrupting Newfoundland, and it's Quebecers who will have to pay for this. Mr. Speaker, when will Ottawa stop using Quebecers' money to make Quebec poorer? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we know that the approach that we've taken is important for our economy. It will be good for the economy in the future, and it will be good for our products to have access to those international markets. And it is an important economic project. It's very important to have economic opportunities, and at the same time, we will find a way to ensure that the Trans Mountain project works for our country.
Ordre du jour.
Orders of the day.
Government orders, government bills. Comment, resuming debate at second reading stage of Bill C-79, Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement, Trans-Pacific Partnership Implementation.
Allowed. Order. I encourage members to take their conversations outside. And I'm not sure we need it, but just to be on the safe side, I'd ask members to assist me by saying shh. Resuming debate. Order. Again, I'd ask members to say shh. Thank colleagues for their assistance. Resuming debate. The honourable member for Durham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's always a deep privilege for me to represent Durham, and at the start of session, it's great to be able to speak on the subject of trade, something I worked on as Parliamentary Secretary to International Trade to the great member from Abbotsford, probably our best trade minister in the history of this country, Mr. Speaker. And it's also great that we're doing so, my first speech with our caucus having grown yesterday, and I'm very proud that the member from Oak Ridge's Aurora Richmond Hill brings perspective on trade to our caucus